without further ado, I am going to introduce our speaker for today, Jennifer Simpson. Jennifer has a multifaceted background ranging from startups, joint ventures, healthcare practices, medical research, hotel development and management, event management, call center management, and diversity and inclusion consulting.
Well, good morning, everyone. It's really a pleasure to be with you this morning. I'd like to thank Ron and Dea for inviting me to your meeting and for providing me with the opportunity to share my thoughts on the relationship between sustainability and business. I said skip everything with the bio. It's really long. I'm this person who's really this eternal kid in a candy shop. There's so much to do in life, and I just want to, try everything. Some days I'm still trying to figure out what am I really doing in life, right? It's exciting. It's exciting. It keeps me up on my toes. So I'm going to dive straight into this presentation. When Daya and I connected about this event, my thoughts really centered on talking about the UN's 2030 Sustainable Development Goals, or the SDGs, as it's most commonly called. The SDGs, is a set of 17 universal goals to end poverty, protect the planet, and improve people's lives everywhere. Efforts towards creating these sustainable development goals was an amazing undertaking and really an achievement on the part of everyone involved. All 193 UN member states adopted the goals. And, if we can even get 5 people in a room to agree, how much more, the hundreds and thousands of people who, really were working on the SDGs and getting the UN member states to adopt them really was an incredible feat. So since 2015, organizations all across the globe, whether government, NGOs, or business and large corporations, really have been working diligently to advance such ambitious actions and make improvements to serious issues such as poverty, hunger, health, education, gender equality, clean water and sanitation, energy, work and economic growth, infrastructure, consumption and production, climate issues, life on water and on land, peace and justice, and continued partnerships for achieving the various SDGs. But as I kept thinking about the purpose of this event, what I came to realize is that the action of promoting and improving sustainability in any form, whether it be based on the 2030 SDGs or on our own corporate responsibility actions, has really been significantly altered by the effects of this pandemic, of the current pandemic. We all realize and understand that our world, humanity as a whole, has been deeply affected and changed. There's been significant shift to our values, our actions, how we make decisions, how we interact with people in our environment, and how we think about our future. The future of business and of work is forever changed, and the old model has gone through a radical shift and will continue to evolve. As with many of you, the pandemic made me think about the one aspect that truly holds the key to our society thriving into the future, and that for me is equity. For far too long, the function and practice of business was short-term profit maximization. Really, the Milton Friedman doctrine of the 1970s out of the Chicago School of Economics. We've been working by focusing on short-term expectations and compromising long-term outcomes because business has been about making as much money as possible and as quickly as possible. But this model of doing business solely for profit is no longer relevant. How we've conducted business isn't going to work anymore. And as leaders in extraordinary times, We need to rethink, revisit, reimagine, and reignite our purpose and values to create a world where equity is the norm. Just think about it for a moment. There's so much inequity in every aspect of life, affecting every type of society across the globe. Since March of this year, since March of last year, we've seen and heard stories of millions of people in our own country of not having or having inadequate access to food, money, healthcare, housing, all to the extent of significantly impacting government systems, healthcare systems, and businesses, amongst other areas. For far too long, we've been following a model where we make money first and solve sustainable issues later. And in some industries, they leave their mess and sustainable issues for someone else or some other entity like government to clean it up much later. What we have known to be normal systems has collapsed. And as business leaders, we need to take on the responsibility of thinking beyond delivering profit to shareholders. Sustainable action will now require planning and action that will support the distribution of wealth to employees, shareholders, and society as a whole. We really need to identify areas where we are acting in such a way that our practices are net positive and sustainable, meaning we are putting out more than we are taking out from society. To be sustainable, we must support our immediate and broader society. As business leaders, the pandemic most likely put you in a position where you've had to pivot or repurpose your business offerings. We've heard the word pivot at least 3 times from 3 of our members this morning. You most likely were thriving or were at the precipice of a breakthrough when the pandemic and social injustices materialized last March and May, respectively. Our collective consciousness has changed almost overnight, and because of cascading events, business owners across the country and the world were faced with such questions like, what is our purpose now? What is our competitive advantage? What are our offerings that no longer make sense or serve a purpose? How do we pivot? What do we need to stay relevant? Where is our value? How do we manage our supply chain systems? And if nothing else, we've all asked ourselves, what do we need to do to stay alive? Because we aren't just business leaders. We are human beings first, with a responsibility to ourselves, our families, our employees, their families, and all of our other stakeholders and their families. All of a sudden, we're all faced with the reality that business was merely a tool to make money and support the micro and macro economies. But that tool will cease to thrive without people. So my point about equity is this. As business leaders, our responsibility moving forward is to create strategies that will support sustainable business practices, not merely sustainable action towards climate change, because sustainability is so much bigger than climate change. It encompasses everything the SDGs is working to achieve. These past few months, we've been burdened with solving the short-term issues, such as staying alive and providing jobs and services. However, I'd like to challenge everyone here to go beyond the short term and start thinking and planning for the long term. Explore areas where you can practice sustainable action that will earn the trust of your employees, shareholders, and customers. So here are 3 ideas I'd like for us to consider. Number 1, support for small business. For some time now, we've been advocating the support of small and independently owned businesses. And the pandemic has been detrimental to the owners of such businesses. If they haven't already, they're going to have to pivot their purpose and their offerings and even their partnerships. So, how can we, in our own way, support these small business owners in our area? Do we create direct partnerships with them so our business and employees lend direct support? What will that look like? If it's a local grocer or restaurant, do we allocate a certain amount of funds to be spent on goods or services each week or each month? And what's that even going to look like now that a lot of the businesses and people have adopted a work from home model, right? So we need to look at our immediate surroundings and support growth around a narrow radius. Number two, inclusion. As business leaders, we're going to have to step up our game when it comes to inclusion. We should think about looking within to truly recognize talent, because business isn't going to solely be focused on financial motives. It's going to encompass natural and social and human capital. And if we need yet another reminder, human capital is the most valuable capital we have to work with and care for. Our people support our business. We simply don't thrive without our people. Symbiotic relationships is going to be key here. So we need to practice inclusion. Invite people to the table, ask them to collaborate, ask them to share their creative ideas to help your business thrive and innovate along with you as business leaders and alongside your usual team of strategists. And lastly, co-ops and microlending. Again, our collective psyche has changed, and the pandemic has really highlighted the importance of supporting and strengthening our businesses through partnerships. We tend to think about co-ops and as a means to develop agricultural business, and we think about microlending to help support individuals in rural areas or developing countries. But I'd like to pose to you that we consider the idea of co-ops and microlending in a broader sense, in a unique way, a way for us to develop the relationship between business and communities. We could start considering this model in-house as a way to develop an idea brought to us by an employee. Instead of the employee having to seek external funding and support, we as business leaders perhaps could be the funding and intellectual resource that would help develop the idea or venture. By setting certain controls to ensure success, this type of model would be a new option in creating equity within society. Yes, the business runs the risk of eventually losing that talent or a number of talent to the newly formed venture, but the reward is so much more than the loss. We gain customer trust and support. We gain people. We increase creativity, innovation, productivity, and we help people out of poverty. We increase our feel-good factor in society, and we're looked upon favorably by our peers. We receive tax breaks, but overall, we're really creating pathways to improve the lives of others who, in cyclical fashion, would be modeling the same behavior and practices for others down the road. Now, if that's not a win-win situation, then I don't know what else would be. So business sustainability and how we as people are going to thrive moving forward is going to require significant long-term planning, one that must take into account our support of a sustainable future. Managing and developing business is no easy task. We know this. And recalibrating old practices is going to be painful. But I'm going to stress here, once again, that as we strategize, we need to keep the future of society and equity in mind as one of the important tenets of our business goals. We've all heard the saying every new year, out with the old and in with the new. And this saying resonates even more so this year than any other year. If our business and our society is to thrive and survive, then we must decide to adopt new sustainable practices to support those long-term outcomes. So I'd like to end here so we can have a short, 5 to 8 minute discussion and brainstorm about ideas, because really we need to engage with others and with one another to help support our success. And that's what this organization is about. It's networking and learning from one another. There are some best practices out there, but a lot of those best practices no longer apply. So we need to think about new practices. So thank you so much, everyone. And I open up the floor to our discussion.